Hello everyone. So in this particular session, we will discuss about DNS, domain name system, and uniform resource locator, which is a URL. Okay. So in the previous sections, we have discussed about web servers, what are the web browsers, search engines. So more important part with respect to the web servers and search engines, the DNS as well as the URL. We look at the things, what is a DNS is and what is a URL is. So as the name suggests, it's a domain name system. So as we all know that today's that each and every person is having his name. Okay, like this, every system will be having his own name. That is we call it as IP address. Each and every system all over the globe will be having his own IP address. So we identify the systems with respect to the IP address. We identify each and every persons with respect to their names. Okay, what does a domain name system is? That is identifies to way to identify and locate the computers which are connected to the internet. For an example, if you take your mobile phone, if you want to search and give a call to your friend, we search by a name, not we would search by a phone number. Like this, the DNS does that particular part. Like means, for an example, I have a yahoo.co.in. So yahoo.co.in is having a respected IP address. Same way with respect to facebook.com, it is having an IP address. So when we type, each and every person cannot able to remember the IP address. So we type his name related to the IP address, which is provided by the one who is providing the website addresses. Okay. So, and one more thing keep in mind is no two organization can have the same domain name. And also each and every domain name always consists of two or more components separated by a period that is nothing but a dot. For an example, like I say www, as I already discussed, the World Wide Web .yahoo.co.in, .com, .co.in, IN is nothing but an India, .com is all over the world they can use like this. Okay, DNS components, we have three components. One is the namespace, a resolver, and name server. We look into each of the things. What is a namespace is, what is a resolver is, what is a name server is. See, namespaces. See, if I see over here the space, the dots represents the dot, each and every dot. So this entire thing, whatever we written over here, it's a domain. Okay, so this refers to the com, this refers to the edu. This is a namespace of the hierarchy, the tree hierarchy which we are given now. This resolves with respect to the dots, and this is with respect to each and every domains. This is an one domain, this is another domain, this is another domain with respect to the .com, this is with respect to the org, this is with respect to the edu. So each and, suppose if I say it's an India IN domain, this is an ac.in domain. So each will be having its own domain spaces. So each and every address, that means URL, will represented by its own domain spaces. So the resolver is the main part which comes over here. The resolver will going to map what are the name of we give as a website address. It will be mapping to its respected IP address, and also with respect to vice versa. If you give an IP address, it's also mapping to its respected website address. Okay, so that is what it's doing over here. So if a resolver is sending a query to a naming server that what is an IP address of www.yahoo.com. So name server will look into the database. If it could able to find out in the database an IP address, it will return back a response saying that this is an IP address for requisition which you have sent as a query as www.yahoo.com. So what does an iterative process does over here? What is an IP address? For an example, if I say there are different process which goes on, we'll look into the first process, which is an iterative resolution process. So what is an IP address of www.go? The client one is sending. So there might be n number of servers. So first is sent to a client So UDL server. Is it an IP, is this particular resolver know the IP address of google.com? Iterative response, given that I don't know the address, try a3.nstdl.com. It suggests for one more server. So again, the request is sent to the a3.nstl.com for requesting what is an IP address of google.com. So again, a3.nstl doesn't know the IP address of a google.com. It try to refers to the one more server. This is a.root-server.net. So again, the client is sending to a one more server, which is a.root server. Again, a.root server doesn't know the IP address. Then it sends back the referring to a one more server, which is a GTDL server. So again, client will going to send to the GTDL server. Again, the GTDL will respond back that we don't know the IP address of that google.com. You refer to the ns1.google.com. So again, a client is again sending a request to the IP address of the google.com to the server ns1. So ns1 know the IP address of the google.com. It sends back as 216.239.37.99. This is how the domain name system works. It converts what are the IP address you people are, what is a website address you are sending to an IP address through an iterative resolution. So if you look into the recursive resolution, each time it never come back to the client. So first, the client send what is an IP address of a google.com. It sends to the UDL server. So UDL server doesn't know the IP address. Then automatically the UDL server sends to the one more server, which is nothing but a EDU server. EDU server doesn't know the IP address. Then EDU server sends a signal back to the one more server, which is a root server. So root server doesn't know the IP address of that particular google.com. Then it sends to the COM server. COM server refer to the Google server. So Google server could able to find the IP address. So it sends back to the COM server. COM server sends to the root server. So root server sends to the EDU server. EDU sends to the UDL server. Then UDL server sends to the client. So this is how the recursive resolutions works. This is the recursive manner of domain name systems work. But each time when a Google server sends back to the process, COM server is having the cache server. Inside a cache memory, it will store the IP address of the google.com by itself. So look at the name server and its architecture. The name servers contains three things: authoritative data, cache data, and agent data. Okay, so this is how the name server process inside the system, how basically the name server process and gets the IP address for a domain name. Okay, so zone data file from this to a master server. So zone data file is sent to the authoritative data. So zone transfer master server is also sent to the authoritative data. Then we have a resolver. As we know that if your system is connected to an internet service provider, the internet service provider itself will be called as a resolver. Suppose if I write a www.google.com, the google.com IP address will be checked. What is an IP address of a google.com inside your own local system first. If a local system, that is a desktop or a laptop, couldn't able to find an IP address of your www.google.com, then it sends your query to a resolver. That resolver is nothing but internet service provider. So internet service provider will send a query to an agent. If it couldn't able to find, ISP itself couldn't able to find an IP address of a domain name, then it sends an agent, a query to an agent, look for a query on behalf of a resolver. So it responds back, authoritative data responds back saying that, so this is where I got the IP address of this particular thing. Also, we have an arbitrary name server. Suppose a resolver cannot able to find out Then we put a one more server, which is nothing but arbitrary name server. Again, a resolver is sending to a name server. Then it's sending to an arbitrary name server. Arbitrary name server will check for an IP address. Then IP address will going to send to authoritative data. Authoritative data is the database where we maintain all the masters of informations of all the IP address table along with them matching domain names. Then authoritative data responds back to the resolver. So each and every time when we are sending the information from the authoritative data back to the resolver is the one which takes care of maintaining information about DNS on its cache memory. So when we request to the authoritative data from the resolver as a query, it responds back. The resolver will store the information of IP address, which are the IP address which has been referred to the authoritative data. That is a primary master and the slave zone. It stores all the information in the resolver. Whenever the next time anybody try to access the ISP address, that means the IP address, the internet service provider directly provide the IP address of that particular domain. So as we know that in a web page, we put an website address that is nothing but it is an URL, Uniform Resource Locator. So each web page has been designated with unique address. It's called Uniform Resource Locator, which is an URL. So the information contained in the URL gives you ability to hop for one web page to another just by a click of a mouse. If you click of a button, you can move from one page to another page. Why? Because each and every link has been associated with respect to a URL as a reference. When you type a URL into your browser or just click on your hypertext link, your browser sends a request automatically to a remote computer, which is called as a web server, and responds back with downloaded or more than one more files. More than a file will be respond. Very careful that every URL is a unique and identified by its own specific file, and also each and every URL will be having its own web server. The web server that can be linked, more than one web server can be linked to that particular URL for responding back to the client request. So as we know that, as I already discussed with respect to the client and server, if any client requests for any resources through an URL, so URL will send through the middle layer. The middle layer will send to an server. Server will going to check for the respective request from the client. If the given request is found in that particular server, server will respond back. That is, a web server will respond back a web page and returns back to the middle layer, and the middle layer will convert everything into an informative manner and send it back to the application layer. The application layer will take care of the responses back and display to a application data of a client. So if I see the structure of a URL, the above URL, what are the domain name.com folder name web page, which are written on, is broken down into the following parts. HTTP:// the first part of an URL indicates what is the protocol we are using to send a client request to the server. There are different types of protocols what we will be keeping. Things simples and may refers to as HTTP. Some protocols might be HTTPS. HTTP means Hypertext Transfer Protocol. If it is a HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. So most of your internet banking and organization transactions, what do? They go with respect to the HTTPS because they want the information to be more secure. So that's why they go with respect to the HTTPS. The second part is www.domainname.com. This portion is used your domain name. It is also refers to as a host, or it refers to as a server. It's called a web server. So folder name, as the name used, implies that the web page refers in the file in the folder of the web server. Okay, the request, what you are requesting, that in that request, that will be stored inside a particular web folder. The web page file name.html, this is the portion of the URL actually your file name is looking for. .html indicates it's the static file. The file name can have a different extension. So .htm part, or depending on how the web server is set up, it could end up with a slash or nothing on. So if I referring to a .htm, it's a static image. Okay, these are the references which are looking for to deliver this particular session. So if you have any doubts, you can put a query on a link. Thank you.